and I wouldn't have been certain of this in 2019, and neither would the Public Health Agency of Canada, that the lengths to which China was willing to go and is willing to go in a contemporary context to influence science and obtain information is deeply disturbing. And yes, China is by all evidence, trying to interfere in our domestic circumstance. The same could be said of Russia, and that the question of foreign interference now is a very real one, in a way that in 2019 it simply wasn't. What you're going to see is two employees who were not disclosing. I mean, they were eminent scientists, people with very respected backgrounds and very respected scientific work, who were undertaking work that they were not disclosing.
That is Health Minister Mark Holland just moments ago saying documents 4 years in the making are finally being released. The documents contain sensitive information about the firing of two scientists at the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. That's this country's top infectious disease lab. Xing Guoqi and her husband, Keting Cheng, were walked out of the lab by police in 2019 and fired in January of 2021. The feds refused at first to release the documents that explained why, citing national security, which led opposition parties to declare the Liberals in contempt of Parliament. The government later took the House of Commons Speaker Anthony Rota to court to prevent the release of those documents. An ad hoc committee was created to look at them. That committee just last week recommended releasing the unredacted version. There is a whole lot to unpack with this breaking news. Michael Couture is here to help us do just that. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Vassy.
So let's go through the hundreds and hundreds of pages and try to synthesize them for people watching. What is the headline out of these documents?
Essentially that these two had a deep relationship, extensive relationship with China. And one of the headlines out of this as well is that they were fired because of this realistic, incredible threat to Canada's economic security. What we are seeing is there were allegations in here that some of the information that was sent on to China, so it appeared in a Chinese patent, but it was scientific information that was produced in Canada in that microbiology lab. So really, it was this behavior that PHAC says, the Public Health Agency of Canada, warranted them being fired, and that is really what sort of triggered all this. As you said, this was all shrouded in secrecy. It was unclear exactly what had happened in those years since they were marched out of that National Microbiology Lab, but they weren't disclosing the information, and they weren't disclosing the relationships throughout this investigation. And that was something that investigators certainly flagged throughout this, and it was something that they cited as one of the reasons why they had to be fired.
So we'll play a little bit more of what the minister said, but there were a ton of questions to him about what the consequences of this will be, because he did outline that what this is a case of, and we obviously haven't read every page of the hundreds of pages yet, but it was a case of basically people who were not adhering to the protocols as they should have been, and those protocols not being enforced to the degree they should. But today, as far as accountability goes, the minister, for example, wouldn't say if anyone at PHAC should be fired over that or whether there should be consequences.
Yeah, and certainly he's saying that, look, those were different times, and now we sort of know better, and we will not have that issue anymore. But certainly that accountability is one of the questions right now. What will happen to anybody who was in charge at the time? We know that these two people lost their jobs, but what about other people who were connected to this and that allowed this to happen under their watch? That certainly right now is not understood. One of the things that he went out of his way to really sort of point out is he said that no sensitive information left the labs. That is something that I think is a little interesting, Vassy, when you consider that this is the National Microbiology Lab in Canada, one of the highest classifications of labs in this country. One would think that almost everything they do is highly sensitive, but the minister says that that did not happen.
Especially when you take into account the direction of the information flow from Canada to China. Wouldn't that inherently mean that it's sensitive?
And you would think that if China wants it, that this is something that certainly would be valuable to Canada and could be sensitive. And these are all questions that the minister, would not answer while he was there in front of reporters, despite a lot of our colleagues' best efforts. And he had to sort of cut and run at one point. But these are questions that this government has sort of left hanging. And, as we look through these documents, again, as you had said, 300 pages, this was not going to take 10 minutes. But hopefully we get to sort of dig a little deeper and see there exactly, what kind of information was shared.
There were a lot of tough questions, and I think he did say he had to go vote, to be fair to him.
He did.